Hi, I'm Maxwell, or that guy. Well, I'm not taking photos right now. Instead, IGN has given me the privilege of an interview with some game developers who are in town for IGN Live. Okay, tell me your names.
Hi, I'm Francis Fink. I'm the marketing director on Aether Iron.
All right.
And I'm Tyler Whitney, the narrative director on Aether Iron.
Oh, yes. Well, I gave your game a look. It's like some adventure games in the 1930s. All right, first question. I haven't gotten around to playing your game yet, but it seems interesting. Pitch me on it. Why should I play it?
So Aether Iron is a narrative-driven turn-based tactical RPG that takes place in a alternate history of 1930s New York. You take the role of a smuggler who has to navigate grand, the grandness of the city, the grand opera that you're falling into. So on the RPG side, you have a party of heroes that you recruit. You have a skill tree that you have to upgrade for yourself and for your heroes, making sure your heroes are happy. And then you have skill checks that you make throughout the game and multiple endings that you can find. And on the turn-based tactical side, you have vehicles that you will be upgrading, finding vehicles to add to your party. And what makes our turn-based tactics so unique is that it's on a moving grid. So you have these vehicles that are speeding through the city, and you have to deal with the momentum and movement of the road as a additional factor when doing turn-based tactics.
Wow, sounds a little innovative. Okay, what can you tell me about? Well, tell me about from your perspective.
Yeah, so all of the things that Tyler mentioned were also a fully voiced story. So we have actors, real human actors, providing voices for the, not entirely sure on the numbers, but something like more than 200 characters. We have something like 80 actors, so some of them are doing multiple voices, but they each do an incredible job really bringing each of these characters to life.
Ah. Okay, well, seems like you got a plan to make it stand out a bit.
That was the hope. That was the hope, and I think to really the one of the big things also, along with the fully voiced 30 hours of RPG, is that we have a soundtrack composed by Christopher Tin and Alex Williamson. Christopher Tin you might recognize from the Civilization series, and he's the first artist to win a Grammy for a video game score. Um, Fantastic artist, amazing sound. He really hit the feel of being in a 1930s noir detective type of world.
Okay, speaking of the 1930s, it is coming up on its centennial, and we get plenty of media today that revisits it. I mean, Cuphead was inspired by cartoons from that era, and we've recently had Cuphead's kind of successor, Mouse P.I., in the recent Spider-Verse. I mean, not Spider-Verse, Spider Noir, starring Nick Cage. Of course, Spider-Verse had the Spider Noir character, so we've been there's plenty of media that revisits that era of black and white and film noir. Why'd you set a game in that period with your game mechanics, and not, let's say, post-apocalyptic or sci-fi? Well, why'd you go along that route in that era?
Well, great question. It started off when we knew we wanted to do a tactical game, and we wanted to do it with vehicles. And as the writer on the project, the sole writer on the project at the time, I was like, what are the okay, we want to do vehicles. What's the coolest vehicle out there? Well, 1930s cars are awesome. They look great.
I may interrupt you.
Please go.
Oh well, I'm thinking Henry Ford and the Model T. Those are some classic cars.
Well, the Model T definitely counts, but I was thinking more of the this classic Gangsterland, Chicago, that type of thing. We have a vehicle based off in the one that Bonnie and Clyde drove. We even put the bullet holes in as a fun little nod to history there. But we took the 1930s cars and we're like, okay, those are cool. How do we make them better? And I was like, well, what if we made them flying, right? And so that's what inspired us to do an alt history of it's almost a science fiction version of 1930s New York. So the individual neighborhoods of New York City have become their own floating kingdoms that fight each other for land, for wealth, for power, prestige, and essentially taking the concept of company towns and the robber barons of the era and saying if they had a neighborhood, their own little flying kingdom, what would it have turned into? How would it have acted? And then essentially throwing the player into a RPG within this world and allowing them to kind of explore around with it.
Hmm. Interesting. Anything you can say? Follow up with that, Francis?
I can't beat what Tyler has on that one.
Okay, well, Tyler's more on the development side, so he's definitely into that. If I should mention Bonnie and Clyde, I cover things related to Fallout New Vegas, and oh yes, and I visited Prim many times. In case you haven't heard, uh, much of Prim is going to shut down, and that includes the Bonnie and Clyde car. So, oh yes, and they also in Las Vegas also has a mob museum. What? Speaking of that, what'd you research in real life that could have inspired this? I know there's Bonnie and Clyde, Al Capone, film noir, the effects of Prohibition. Anything you can tell me about studying history that went into your game?
No, that is the best question I think anyone has ever asked in an interview. Because history, my background is as a historical archivist and researcher. So if I have any sins in building this project is that I spent way too long in building out historical profiles for everything. In fact, one of the things I learned probably too late was that not every character needs a historical inspiration and pages long backstory. So it was a foundational part of this game to be rooted in history. And most of the characters, most of the locations, a lot of the plot lines all have direct parallels in history. And we get to have a lot of fun with that. So, for example, there's three factions, areas that you get to explore in our world. Each of these baronies that are their own little floating kingdoms, and each of them are inspired by different subcultures in New York from the 19th and 20th centuries. So the first one is inspired by the White Wings, which was a group that was formed when New York City wanted to create a city-run sanitation services. So they hired a war veteran. They said, "You have all the power and money to do as you please." He effectively formed a paramilitary group. They had their own parades. They had full white military uniforms. They had to take territory physically from other groups in the city to do their services. They had their own resorts. They had their own music. They had endorsements from the President of the United States. They were this own subculture that was like a flash in the pan. And we asked the question, what if they didn't die out? What if that community got to grow? So that same philosophy applied several times over to most of the game. We have a faction inspired by the Queen of the Underworld and her largely female gang at the end of the 19th century. And then we have some inspired by the temperance movement, specifically Carrie Nation, who was a famous temperance movement leader who would go around and smash things with her axe. I could tell you history stories all day long with each of the characters, but I'll leave it at that, just to kind of instill that we are heavily inspired by history.
Yeah, they've done a ton of research, but I think one of the things with the sanitation department in New York now is still they have military rankings, if I'm not incorrect. Yeah.
Wow, well, you make it sound like sanitation's like military gangsters.
It's kind of what it was, or at least what it started off as. And so if you're looking at specific documentation that we look towards, one of my favorites was there's a trilogy written by a historian named Wallace, and he did the history of Gotham. Spectacular trilogy for any history nerds out there. It is several thousand pages of each page being a brand new story. My favorite one recently is why New York banned lobster palaces for a short period of time, which led to a chain of events that created what we know as the modern day nightclub. So history is very fundamental to our project, and so but I will stop myself so that I don't take up all our time.
Oh please, I'll this is so what you put into it makes me want to research it myself. So, all right, and all right, Francis, you're of course on the marketing side. How are you giving this game wide appeal?
I think the game's quality itself is what helps bring out the appeal. It has amazing art, voice acting. The gameplay itself, we have unique turn-based car combat, which is unusual in this genre. Car combat's not something that's typical to a tactical RPG. And then the story itself is really deep. There's multiple characters with more than 20 hours of gameplay.
Wow, wow. So turn-based car combat,
Right.
not something you see often. I mean, when we think turn-based, we think, well, basically chess or characters hitting each other in Final Fantasy. But of course, there's games like Twisted Metal or those strategy games like Warcraft or Starcraft where you build the vehicles and they fight each other, in real time. But what makes vehicles such an interesting concept to give to turn-based mechanics?
Yeah, so it's I think one of the things is cars have their own physics to them, and so trying to adapt the game to how cars would behave across a moving environment. So there are upcoming hazards and that kind of thing that you need to plan ahead for while you're placing yourself on the map, as well as there are you can, when you have a gun in a car, you can only shoot it out of one side or the other side. You might not be able to shoot it out of the back. So you have different abilities that are directional as well, which really play into the tactical nature of the game.
Okay, and Tyler, any thoughts on applying cars to turn-based combat and even further in your game?
Yeah, from a narrative standpoint, one thing that was really important to us is that we wanted our car combat, to be firmly rooted in the game, the world that we built. We didn't want the combat as a mechanic to be easily transferable. And by that I mean we didn't want that to create something where if you shuffled up the world building, it would still work just as well. So narrative necessitated mechanics, mechanics necessitated narrative. I mean, back to when we started as cars and then we built an entire world based off of why do 30s cars make sense. And so likewise we said, okay, now that we have flying cars, what must happen in gameplay? And so we, like Francis said, you have directional shooting, right? Because it's not super easy to switch the position of a gun. You have the roads changing underneath you, providing that challenge where they can widen, split, narrow, deteriorate, go into tunnels, that type of thing. When you destroy a car, the debris flies backwards, hurting everything behind it. Going forward is more costly than slamming the brakes and going straight back, right? So all of these elements, it was really important to us to think of, okay, what does this setting necessitate for mechanics? And that's what I think really makes kind of our car combat stand out as unique when it comes to the turn-based space.
Okay, all right. So in this game, who are the players playing as, and what's their story? What's their motivations? How's it going to drive the narrative and the story so we see how things play out? What's going to keep us hooked from these characters?
That is a very big question. I'll try to tackle it as best I can.
Go ahead.
So you take the role of Gia, a smuggler in this world. Now, if you think of New York is a city full of these floating kingdoms, each with their own rules and regulations and cultural norms. Being a smuggler is pretty good business. Unfortunately, by the time we reach Gia, in classic noir fashion, she is down on her luck. Things are not looking great for her. She's gone through some stuff that's ruined her reputation, so she's got to just take any job that comes her way. And the job she takes is escorting a scientist from the uppers, which is kind of like the middle class strata of islands in our city, to the lowers, which is the poor, more working class part of the city. Now you've got this fancy scientist on the run, and everyone is saying it's an easy job with no strings attached. It's supposed to be simple. But again, one thing that was important for us was to honor and be inspired by classic noir fiction of the time. And so that setup obviously leads to being pulled into this grander story, conspiracy that is unfolding before you that you have to navigate. And then you follow that classic hero journey of her going from a smuggler that is disassociated from the suffering of others as a survival mechanism to becoming invested in something bigger than herself. And so the course of the story, we have this kind of conspiracy that you have to unravel, and over the course of it, you also recruit heroes to your side. You bring people in. And one thing that I think more than the plot, more than the world building that we're exceptionally proud of is the characters that we built. Um, Besides being inspired by real historical people in all these cases, we spent a long time trying to make these characters multidimensional. People, at the end of the day, the reason that we become attached to characters is not just their heroism, but it's the fact that it's their heroism in light of them being just like us, right? That they come in contact with the same struggles and suffering and morally difficult choices, and in light of that, they find a way to make the right decision, which is inspiring and something we can hold on to. So each of the characters we have, they have a something they're wrestling with. They have a unique community that they're a part of, which expands the world building. But you can grow attached to them, help them through their issues, have do casual fun things with them. In classic RPG sense, you have your little slices of life that you go in the middle of everything. So when you're asking what is it that we really think hooks people, if you're not hooked by the world building, then we hope that the characters are what bring you in, that you can grow to love them and want to see how their different endings can come about.
All right. Seems like that'll keep some people playing throughout the game. And mentioned Gia, female smuggler. I think smuggler. I of course think Han Solo, but maybe there's some real ones from history. Would you say Gia is based on anyone in particular, even movie or real life?
We have two leads that were more of an amalgamation of tropes. We wanted to play with the idea in a lot of noir literature, right? You have the classic male detective and how they act. And something we found it particularly interesting to make something new and exciting is to take that concept, kind of analyze it. Okay, how does the male depressed alcoholic detective work in this type of realm of art, and say, like, how can we distinguish ourselves? How can we do something different? How can we play with those ideas and turn it into something new? And so we took that archetype and we changed it into Gia. And so we took a lot of inspiration from Raymond Chandler and books of the era to be like to play with the idea. And similar with our second lead, the scientist that you end up transporting, who becomes a window into another world. We pulled from kind of the mad scientist trope cliche in a lot of this stuff, and we're like, okay, how can we give this cliche more depth, more interest, more something new? And so while we did pulled from Han Solo, we also pulled from Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow quite a bit to create those two core characters. And then when it comes to the rest of the supporting cast, that's when you get into pulling from very specific people in history. One of my favorites being there's a hero that you recruit in Act 2 who is based off of a labor leader that went missing. And in our version, we were asked about, okay, how would not just that character, but then we give the family of, how would they react to it, how would they respond. So we took from that character. We also pull from, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Cinderella Man. There's a boxer named Braddock at the time, and so we pull him into that character as well. So we pull from all over, and like I said, I could get lost in talking about the history, and so if you want to, we can jump in, but I'll try to keep it as high level as that for now.
Okay, well, you actually mentioned labor unions. And of course, we think the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, but overall, labor unions are kind of a good thing, but they do have a history of possibly being associated with mafias and communism. Would you say even communism or the fear of it plays into this?
Well, that's a big question. So when we approached building this, one thing that was on top of our mind was a few different things. One is, how do we make this kind of something that a story that works outside of the political context of the day. So we're not we try our best not to make direct political parallels to the modern day and making direct political commentary, and not because we're necessarily afraid to do that type of commentary, but rather we wanted to focus on making a story that's a little bit more timeless, something that works outside of context, but also focusing in on real people and relationships. So in in our world, or at least in our story, we don't focus in on the ideologies of the time, say fascism, communism, anarcho-syndicalism, democracy necessarily, but what we do focus in is on real people and how they experience the societies that they're in. And so what I mean by that is it's one thing to do an analysis of like, okay, communism and how does that work as an ideology and how might that work at a higher level, like structurally. It's another to be like, okay, these are people we're living in a system that have certain values. They might not know fancy terms, but what they do know is what they're experiencing right in front of them, right? So um, in our story, there is a distinct underclass. They are Aetherians. They're the people that live inside the islands, the floating islands that keep them afloat. They are more broadly referred to as Aether rats by the broader populace, and they are seen as a other, as a separate entity. They are disparaged and isolated. And while that type of community, you may easily say, okay, let's apply some sort of ideology and give them that type of viewpoint. Rather, what we did was, working class people that are dealing with this type of stuff, they believe they are trying to survive. They care about their material conditions. They believe about, caring for their children. They have day-to-day lives where things can suck. They can be working, but they also find joy. They find community, and right there, the story of focusing in on the human experience is what we found as important. So, to your question on how do we explore ideologies like communism, we don't go directly into that. Rather, focusing more on the human experience and kind of, without fancy terms, exploring how people go through these scenarios. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I'm sure you're kind of you don't want to be hit too close to home with what we got going on today, but you still want to reflect the period of the time. Okay, how about we talk about the talents behind the characters? Who's voicing your characters? Yeah, if you can say that.
Tyler,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so our main character, Gia, is voiced by Rhiannon Moshal, which is actually, she's a voice actor in Mouse PI as well. She is a wonderfully skilled and kind and just amazing person to work with. We're exceptionally lucky to have found her talent. Then we have our second lead, Nellie, voiced by Kat Proton. I can never pronounce her last name.
I'll look her up later.
Thank you. I think it's Protano. Is that right, Francis? Yeah. Okay. And then I am blanking on the rest of the cast, and so that might be good to look up.
Sounds like you must have had a big cast associated with this. So,
We did.
would you say you got some new people in? Was this?
Yeah, we had a handful of people where they didn't have too many credits, and so I think we have a pretty good mix of some pretty experienced industry voice talent and kind of new and upcoming. Um, yeah, if unfortunately we don't have our creative director here who did a lot of the audio directing and speak more to it, but he's just all around an incredibly skilled and caring voice cast that became invested in the project as we went on. Um, by the end, would have we'd have actors being like, "Hey, not really feeling that what this character is saying in this particular instance necessarily fits how they've been portrayed previously," and it became part of the collaborative process, which we loved because it means that they were taking ownership of the characters and becoming the characters, and we just found the process overall quite rewarding and took something that's a very exhausting process, 6 hours in the booth, and made it a little lighter of a burden based off of the people we worked with. Yeah.
Oh, it must have been an incredible experience working with them to see them voice all these characters, make it come alive. Okay, the 1930s, known for what? Big band, swing, jazz. Did you incorporate that into this game?
The yes, to a degree. So a big thing on a part of our world, the immersion element, is also being historically aware of the different types of music and trying to apply that as best we can. So Christopher Tin and Alex Williamson, when we put together the soundtrack, we pulled a lot from the era, a lot of films and scores in order to build something um, that kind of was very evocative. Uh, so, but that created a challenge because on one hand, while music from the era is definitely recognizable, when you start getting into the more nuanced, like emotional beats you would want out of the music, maybe not something as recognizable as noir or era specific. And so that's when we had to start looking for influence from Goldsmith era movies, which came a little bit later. It also looked into 40s, a little bit 50s, which is still associated with the era, but just though maybe not as uh, historically targeted at 1938, 1939. I wish I could give you more stuff involved with that, but our creative director is the one that worked with Christopher Tin and Williamson the most to really create this stuff, and he's a complete, if I say music nerd, I don't know if that really captures it. Oh. But yeah, Dwayne Stinnett he can nerd out about music. We'll say that.
Of course. I once interviewed Fallout composer Enon Zur, and he can go on about it because he's the music guy. But I'll take your word for it that your creative director really went into this.
Oh, absolutely, and I feel like that I will only undersell what we're going into. What I can speak to, since I'm not in, I don't know the music theory behind everything, is that we wanted more than anything for you to, if you close your eyes, that you would feel inside a noir film, and I think we accomplished that. And I think we had an incredibly just skilled team between the two of them and the orchestras they worked with to build that experience. And then note to the side, they're incredibly kind and awesome people. Like I had Christopher Tin he's quite the star when it comes to music, and when I first met him I had stars in my eyes, and it was definitely challenging to be like, okay, let's collaborate, because I was a bit starstruck. But at the end, he was kind, generous, and was able to make something truly special.
Okay, wow. Tyler, you really went a lot about what makes this game so immersive, so great, all the work you put into it. How long did this overall project take you before it got released?
Oh, a long while. I think just over 4 years, Francis, is what we're thinking. Yeah, it went through a lot of a lot of iterations, so a pretty iterative process where early prototypes were vastly different than what ended up coming out. We looked at making something more that's akin to a roguelike. We at one point did Mario Kart with guns. We explored a lot of different versions, and we were fortunate enough to be able to go through that iterative process, take lessons from it, learn those lessons, and move on, and still be able to, have the capacity to make something that came out. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's always satisfying to get a game launched, even a small one. All right, well, I think we've had a lot of details from Tyler. Okay, Francis, how about let's try and close up here. How about some final words on what do you think if players will be satisfied with this game? If this is the game they should be playing. Can you speak on that?
Sure. If you like narrative RPGs, if you like a noir world, if you like world building, New York history, tactical combat, please come try our game. It's available on Steam now. We have a demo available, so try it out, and hopefully, if you enjoy it, please purchase.
Okay, good. Also, you mentioned earlier about sanitation and the mob and generals. I'm thinking that was kind of something Tony Soprano had a cover of. Does that mean things are still about the same today?
Oh, I couldn't speak to that. A lot of my historical research was firmly rooted in the era. As a historian, one thing I can say, I guess, to that effect is that as we can always find the past infinitely interesting, but the past was at one point the present, and so at some point, 100 years from now, some people are going to be like, 2020s, man. Those were that was a crazy time, full of interesting things to research. I could go back and take a look at it, and I think if we reach a point where we can treat the modern day with the same deference as we do the past, or we should treat the past, then I think we can appreciate more the times we live in and more readily try to make a difference in the current time.
All right, well, you speak of the time today, Let's see, Billy Joel had that song about We Didn't Start the Fire, then Fallout Boy did a modern version of it. Let's say with everything that's going on, there'll be a band that will do another version of We Didn't Start the Fire based on everything that's even going on today. As if Fallout Boy's version wasn't recent enough. Okay, how about any final word? Actually, since you have a foundation for a original IP, are you going to take it any further with your world you have here? Like any sequels, spin-off material? I mean, you said you didn't want too much backstory to get in the way. This isn't One Piece. Of course, not a lot of things are. Kind of like how Star Wars is like, okay, we introduce the concepts, then you got to read uh, 10 more books about this character, and maybe this character is going to get a spin-off. Do you have any plans to further this world you've created in any way?
I think it comes down to when we built this, we built something immensely large. And so if we are given the privilege and the opportunity, we would love to provide more. It's going to rely on the reaction from players. If people are buying the game, if they want more, we will happily provide more. Uh, we've got stuff planned for updating our current game. But if support continues to grow, then we have stuff for or we'd love to do more. I guess I'll leave it at that point. So yeah, if the opportunity arises, we will give people as much as they ask for.
Tyler's being really humble. They're still actively working on the game. We just did a major update. We're currently working on more map updates, more missions, as well as more mini games. So the game is still in full development, and we're adding to it and making the experience even more richer than it already is.
All right, I think I saw the release date. It's on Steam already, right? And you're adding to it as we speak.
That's correct, and it's also on sale for the next 2 weeks.
Okay, well, I think we covered a lot. Any final words?
No, I think the final story that I like to kind of end off these conversations with is that when one of my favorite games when I was growing up was BioShock.
Oh, yes. That's a game I've been thinking. You've been talking about floating islands, that style. I'm thinking not just Bioshock, but Bioshock Infinite when we get to Detective Booker DeWitt and then there's an investigation, and that leads to something bigger.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been my favorite game for a long time, or at least one of them. And when I first played, I only played a couple of hours, and I put it down. I didn't pick it up again. And it wasn't for a few years that I actually got to pick it up and finish it. But in that time, even after a few hours, it had built a world in my head that I fell in love with, that I built stories in, that I would spend time daydreaming about, exploring, making up who knows what that existed there. And I think in a world where we have so many games coming out all the time, and as I get older, there's less and less time to play games. The hope is that or at least for me personally, I'd love people to finish the game. I think it's a great game. I love the story. But if people only have the opportunity to play a short amount of time, And if we can give people a new world to explore in their heads, if we can give them that small little joy of an exciting story to fall asleep to, or to space out in traffic, then that little joy coming into the world is something that uh, I'm happy to provide. So I guess final thought here of I think it's something that I hope people can find that little joy in and make their lives just a little bit better. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Francis. Any final words from yourself on from your end?
No, just thank you for everyone that's already played the game and supported, and thank you for watching this video, and we just really appreciate the audience that makes this all possible.
All right, well, you know what? Thank you guys for taking time to speak with me. I'm not a big YouTuber, but hopefully maybe someone will come across this and they'll see the love you put into this game, and well, let's hope the fans can get interested, get involved, and push us even further. I mean, hey, Spider Noir got his show, and even Cuphead got an animated show in an upcoming game. So let's see where Aether and Iron goes from here. Thanks for watching. Thank you both.